I would not say that tomorrow morning, don't begin by automatically opening every WhatsApp message. Don't do that. I would not say that. I would rather say that read a trusted news source first. Mute groups that produce constant noise. As users, we should be in a position to understand what kind of content we are engaging with. Before forwarding anything, pause and ask, who created this? What is the original source? Is the date and the location correct? What emotion is pushing me to share it? It should not be an impulse just to share something and information which has reached you. Younger generation is acting much more maturely than the older generation. Not every message needs a reaction and not every reaction needs to be a forward. Not say that the internet is fundamentally incompatible with truth. It can transmit evidence, journalism, research, eyewitness testimony with extraordinary speed. But its present commercial architecture is largely indifferent to truth and often rewards the qualities that work against truth. The phone does not physically push someone into the street. It makes the street feel like morally necessary place to be.
Today, I'm joined by Sadia Azim, the author of Forwarded as Received. We're going to be talking about how misinformation spreads and why it matters. Sadia, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. First and foremost, tell me what led you to write a book on this topic?
Thanks, Gagan, for asking this question. It takes me back to the time when there was a change of government in India and we were all moving and exploring the digital ecosystem. It was a phase of transformation completely. I write the book with the perspective of an observer, just as a user, as you and I navigated our own ways on the digital ecosystem. And I was totally overwhelmed by the kind of content which was taking our attention, our minds, our jobs, our style of functioning. And I started documenting this journey. And this book is a result of that journey. So while I document and I talk a lot of things which has happened with the perspective of a journalist, but mostly as users, how we navigated our ways through the digital ecosystem is one of the factors why I started exploring this particular subject and why I ended up writing the book.
Tell me why Forwarded as Received feels like it frees us of any moral responsibility.
The title of the book is because Forwarded as Received creates a psychological distance between the action. Action means what you do on the digital ecosystem and its consequences. So the sender tells themselves that I did not write this, I'm merely passing it on. It turns an ethical decision into what appears to be a technical act, being on the social media. So almost like delivering a sealed envelope without being responsible for what is inside it. But digital forwarding is not a neutral activity. When I forward something, I lend it my name, my relationships, and my credibility. Also the content. So like as in a sealed envelope, the person who is delivering it doesn't know what's inside. In terms of digital delivery, you know exactly what is inside and what you're sharing. So the disclaimer may reduce my comfort, but it does not reduce the impact of the message. In fact, the recipient may believe the content precisely because it came from me. And the book shows how responsibility becomes dangerously diluted in this process of delivering. Everyone performs a seemingly minor act, yet together those acts create a major social consequence. Nobody feels responsible because nobody believes they were the original author. The platform, the creator will blame the platform and the platform will blame the user. And then the user says, I only forwarded it. The result is a system in which everybody participates and nobody accepts authorship. So I've talked about one of the very pertinent example in this case was in 2015, and that was like 11 years back. This is the Dadri lynching mentioned in the prologue as an example. And before this guy, Mohammed Akhlaq, was killed, WhatsApp messages about Muslims allegedly slaughtering cows had reportedly circulated in the locality for some time. And those forwarding the messages may not have explicitly intended the killing, but the reputation emotionally primed the community. And when the announcement was made from a local temple there, the rumor no longer sounded new or improbable. It sounded like a confirmation of something people had already been taught to fear. The other example, what I actually talked about in the book, was from the 2018 and 2019 child kidnapper rumors. Videos using unrelated images of Syrian children was repackaged as a warning that child lifters had entered Indian villages. And the instruction was protect your child and warn everyone immediately. But forwarding therefore felt not merely innocent but responsible, even virtuous. Yet, ordinary people were lynched for being mistaken as kidnappers. And it was across India, from Assam to Jharkhand to Madhya Pradesh, and each sender thought they were transmitting a warning. Collectively, they were transmitting panic. In my hometown, back in Bihar, in Purnia, in one of the remotest districts, where there was a witch killing case, and it takes the entire matter much further. YouTube videos created an atmosphere of superstition, and a WhatsApp message summoned local people to confront a family accused of witchcraft. Now, 5 members of that family were burnt alive by neighbors from the same community. Again, the violence did not begin with one dramatic command. It accumulated through content, belief, forwarding, and group mobilization. So I argue that the creation is not the only form of responsibility. Circulation is also participation. So a disclaimer cannot provide moral clean hands when our hands have pressed the forward button.
Circulation is also participation. And you talk very extensively about the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Both are bad. But tell me more about why both are so dangerous and why they're different.
So, I did extensively research on these two terms. Misinformation and disinformation are related, but they are not the same phenomenon. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information shared by someone who may genuinely believe it. Disinformation is deliberately created and manipulated to deceive, destabilize, profit, or influence. I use the terms pathogen and attack distinction while explaining these two terms because they require different responses. So a pathogen spreads through contact, often through people who do not know they are infected. A digital attack has planners, targets, and strategic intent. And misinformation therefore calls for correction, education, maybe friction, and trusted communication. Disinformation requires investigation, attribution, platform accountability, and where appropriate, maybe some sort of disruption of organized networks. The danger is that we often see only the message in front of us, not its history. A piece of disinformation may begin as a deliberately designed attack, but become misinformation as ordinary people pass it along in good faith. I would say disinformation is manufactured at the source, and misinformation is often what it becomes during circulation. I have given simple examples such as of an uncle forwarding a claim that onions can cure COVID-19. So he may genuinely believe he's protecting his family. That is misinformation. Treating him as a malicious propagandist would be both inaccurate and counterproductive. It would humiliate the very person whose trust is needed to correct the falsehood. But in India, this has been very prevalent, like various welfare schemes of the government. One of the schemes, which is PM Vishwamitra scheme, which illustrates the distinction between the two terms and how these categories merge. So you would realize that YouTube videos claimed that every Aadhaar holder would receive a free sewing machine or 15,000 rupees from the government, although no such scheme ever existed. Now, the content may have been deliberately fabricated to generate views or maybe advertising income or maybe some sort of acquiring personal data of people, but many viewers probably shared it because they thought they are helping relatives access a government benefit. So the creator may be engaged in disinformation, but the hopeful citizen becomes a carrier of misinformation. We have also seen the similar kind of pattern during Operation Sindoor, which provides more serious example of a digital attack. There were false claims which alleged that Pakistan had crippled India's electricity grid or maybe captured Indian pilots or launched attack on religious and military sites. So the book describes these as deliberately crafted narratives emerging during a period of geopolitical tension. Yet they acquired much of their power only after Indian television channels or influencers and ordinary users amplified them, shared them. A foreign information operation was transformed into a domestic epidemic through local circulation. And that is why this distinction matters, because if there is a wrong diagnosis, it will produce the wrong remedy. When organized disinformation is dismissed as harmless rumors or just misinformation, the architects remain invisible. But when ordinary citizens are treated as hostile agents, they become defensive and less willing to accept correction. So we need to ask two different questions: who designed the falsehood and who merely carried it? Without that kind of distinction, we risk, treating an attack as a gossip or a misinformation, or an anxious relative as an enemy. So that is the distinction between misinformation and disinformation.
It's rather unfortunate that the carriers happen to be our trusted friends and family.
Yes.
And you talk extensively about it's in the best interest of your loved ones, and it's sent in good spirit. But tell me how just mindless sharing of things on instant messaging apps, and WhatsApp being the biggest one in India, affect our critical thinking.
Human beings cannot independently verify every piece of information they encounter. We therefore rely on shortcuts. And one of the strongest shortcut is familiarity. Who sent this to me? Do I know them? Have I trusted them before? On WhatsApp, the message rarely arrives as anonymous content. It arrives from a sister, an uncle, an old classmate, a colleague, maybe a doctor in the family, or a respected community figure. The message borrows that person's biography. A lie from a stranger is merely content. A lie from someone we love can feel like a warning, like, something very intimate information. That intimacy bypasses critical thinking because rejecting the message can feel like rejecting the person. Correcting an elder may appear disrespectful. Questioning a community leader looks disloyal. Challenging a family group consensus can create a social dispute larger than the original claim. So we remain silent, respond with a folded hands emojis, or forward it elsewhere just in case. This is what I call the trust cage, a digital environment in which trust and truth become entangled. We believe information because we trust the sender and then transfer both the information and the trust to the next person. Credibility attaches itself to familiarity before evidence has time to arrive. Since I was talking about the Dadri case, I would again go back to it. Killing actually demonstrates this emotional setting. The claim did not arrive only from an unknown account. Messages about cow slaughter circulated within local and ideologically familiar networks. When the temple announcement followed, it carried religious and community authority. So the villagers did not experience the rumor as an external proposition requiring any sort of evidence. They experienced it as an information coming from within their own social world. So that was one of the major reasons. Similarly, as I was talking about the victims of witchcraft, and there the victims and the attackers, they both belonged to the same community, tribal community. They shared same customs, faith, and class. Everything was same. But a popular online guru actually supplied supposed knowledge about witchcraft, while WhatsApp converted that belief into local mobilization. And the authority of the guru and the intimacy of the community reinforced one another. Neighbors who had previously lived together became participants in the violence. Because the allegation was socially authenticated, and it was not factually correct, but it was, since it came in from people they knew so well and they had great respect for that person, that is why they actually believed on that person. In the book also describes at a more personal everyday level, where I write about being emotionally pulled in different directions by online messages from people I cared about, admired, or had once shared classroom and professional spaces with. Online disagreement became performative with an audience and a kind of invisible scoreboard eventually. Like, I have tried this personally, that I started leaving groups one by one and trying to reclaim silence
Done that.
from endless forwards and escalating exchanges. But that personal experience led directly to the idea of that trust cage. You don't want to leave because you want to be informed, you want to be updated, you want to know what my peer group is talking about. But again, the constant exposure corrodes the clarity of thoughts. You don't know whether people are critically thinking about what they are talking in such groups. So the intimacy of WhatsApp is therefore both its strength and its vulnerability. It was built around trusted relationships, but misinformation has exploited that very relationship. The messages on WhatsApp actually bypasses the fact-checking desk in our head also, and because it enters through familiar door. That's one of the major reasons.
In addition to this, WhatsApp being small cog in the wheel, do you think platforms like Meta and X being hyper personalized. They push content which actually is very, very tailored to you. They know you more than yourself. Do you think that affects critical thinking?
Yes, definitely. And I have mentioned very critically about it in the book as well, extensively and critically both. Hyper personalization appears to offer us a great choice, but over time, it can produce exactly the opposite. Every click, pause, like, share, comment tells the platform what keeps us engaged. And the algorithm then gives us more of the same kind because they feel that we are engaged in this particular kind of content. And gradually, discovery is replaced by confirmation. So we do not encounter the world as it is, we encounter the narrower world assembled from our previous reactions. And the crucial point is that algorithms do not necessarily identify what is meaningful or purposeful to us. They identify what successfully holds our attention, like anger, fear, maybe moral outrage, are especially effective because they demand an immediate response. Like an immediate response comes in the form of if you are not doing anything, you're just sharing it. So that's an immediate response, and a thoughtful argument which asks you to pause is not counted by those algorithms. So an inflammatory post asks us to react now. The platform learns that outrage works better and begins privileging it. So, and this is what is the feedback loop we talk about. We all know about it, that how social media platforms do depend on feedback loop kind of, aspect. And I react to one provocative post and the platform shows me 10 more, and their repetition makes the issue appear larger, more certain, and more widely accepted than it may actually be. Meanwhile, difference of opinions and quieter emotional registers disappear from view. I begin to think that everybody sensible is agreeing with me, and that anyone who does not must be ignorant or immoral or hostile towards me. The book actually describes this through the idea of a group polarization. When people repeatedly encounter those who already agree with them, their opinions do not simply remain stable, they often become more extreme because everybody is talking in the same language. And they move towards the edges because they encounter less disagreement in the group when they are talking, and therefore feel less need to examine their own assumptions because everybody is talking the same thing and liking the same things, same kind of content, and the platforms are also providing you the similar kind of content. I use the expression the hell of sameness, drawing on Philosopher Byung Chul Hun Hans, to describe what happens when platforms reward only content that is immediately recognizable, repeatable, and easy to classify. We trade many different voices for one standardized register. Dialects flatten into trending, like Hindi or English. Folk idioms become familiar meme templates, and complex disagreements are compressed into engagement bait. So the loss is not only intellectual but emotional. In the book, I actually compare it to a cultural world in which an action film and a love story could both succeed because people had room for rage, tenderness, humor, ambivalence, and sorrow. But under the logic of recommendation, whichever emotion delivers the strongest engagement begins to overwhelm the others. So tension and subtlety do not necessarily disappear because people reject them. They become invisible because our democratic and cultural strength has never been sameness. It has been the coexistence of languages, faiths, cuisines, our literary forms, and distinct ways of understanding the world. So, our unity is not supposed to mean that everyone speaks in one voice. It is kind of an arrangement in which many voices can remain distinct while still belonging together. So social media feeds, they combine political violence, religious nationalism, and performative patriotism into a common emotional vocabulary.
Extending onto this, any content these days can be easily turned into false narratives. Do you feel that the internet is fundamentally broken?
Should not see that the internet is fundamentally incompatible with truth. It can transmit evidence, journalism, research, eyewitness testimony with extraordinary speed. But its present commercial architecture is largely indifferent to truth and often rewards the qualities that work against truth. Because, as I was talking earlier, truth comes with more compassion, a little thoughtfulness, whereas the commercial architecture of the internet is about speed, how soon you react. So mostly other emotional forms such as anger and such as outrage is more visible on the internet rather than more intellectual dialogues maybe. Truth usually needs context, provenance, patience, and qualification. The internet, on the other hand, it rewards portability, speed, simplicity, and emotional force. So, a truthful account often comes with maybe dates, caveats, supporting evidence, whereas a viral falsehood comes with just images and alarming words such as, say, shocking and exposed, which makes you visit the platform and maybe take it further from there. I have talked about an incident about a cake story in the book. During the pandemic lockdown, I actually baked a cake for a cousin and photographed it and shared it in a family WhatsApp group. Later, I removed the birthday caption and reused the same photograph for a colleague's work anniversary. And then I used edited versions in school, college, other residential, professional groups. This was my creation. But eventually, the cake appeared on Pinterest and even returned to me altered as a birthday greeting. So the image had completed a journey through the network and come back without its original context. That was still an innocent echo chamber, but the more revealing episode involved a cake baked and photographed by my sister-in-law. And this was like an experiment we were running. The image began appearing in different birthday messages. So you share it in different groups and then you try and trace it. We tried to trace how it was repurposed. And you would be surprised to know that in one wellness group, it was presented as a gluten-free superfood dessert for women with PCOS. Yeah. And elsewhere, somebody else claimed that, and these are groups, that these are echo chambers because this could be a school group which has a similar kind of people also in the college group, and then you have professional group. So and in the locality or in apartment groups, we actually traced that and found that people claiming nutritional expertise added voiceovers, warning women not to eat such desserts during fasting months because they supposedly damaged hormonal balance. Then a hate mongering group added a communal allegation. The cake supposedly contained eggs and was being passed off as a prasad during the holy month of Sawan. So the cake itself had not changed. Its frosting, presentation, and photograph remained substantially the same, but its story had moved from celebration to health advice, from health advice to a moral warning, and then from a moral warning to a religious conspiracy. So, this is the life cycle of a digital storm. Content is first detached from its origin, it is then given a new caption or voiceover, an emotional hook is added, there is hope, fear, disgust, patriotism, or maybe some sort of religious injury. It is inserted. And in India, there are very diverse group of people. So, how everyone is using it, we are not aware of it. And so we don't know until you trace it. Usually, what we have seen is repetition gives its credibility, but algorithms increase its visibility, and users continue adapting it for different languages, locations, and audiences. And by the time a correction appears, the original source may be impossible to recover.
Of course, it goes through
So,
so many reincarnations. You really can't trace it back to
yes.
the root, the source. Tell me something. At the heart of it is still the innocence of just harmless sharing with your friends and family. But oftentimes, as you mentioned also, it can also turn into violence. What transforms a passive phone user into being violent?
So, a passive user becomes an offline participant through a sequence of emotional priming, a social confirmation, and behavioral instructions. Werther effect and the Papageno effect are two influential concepts in media and communication studies that illustrate how media narratives can shape human behavior. So, the Werther effect refers to the increase in imitative suicides following prominent or sensationalized portrayals of suicide. And this is a term which is derived from Goethe's 1774 novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. In contrast, the Papageno effect is named after a character in Mozart opera, The Magic Flute. It describes the protective influence of media stories that portray hope, resilience, and successful coping with crisis, encouraging individuals to seek help rather than to resort to self-harm. So I mention about it is because one kind of effect can actually prime you to commit some sort of harm, which includes violence. Whereas the other effect is basically how to restrain. And it depends, and these two are both media theories and actually affect our behavior when we receive an information. A repeated message creates fear or resentment. Then a shocking visual makes the claim appear real. There are more of it. It's repetitive. The message often invokes false authorities such as the police or district administration and then arrives through trusted relatives or community leaders. Finally, it gives the user something to do, like warn the village, assemble here, identify this person, or protect your community. At that point, the message no longer invites thoughts, it scripts action. So the transformation is therefore gradual. The user first watches, then believes, then forwards, and then joins the group, and finally acts under the illusion that the crowd has already verified the truth. The phone does not physically push someone into the street. It makes the street feel like morally necessary place to be. So you would now see that a lot of protests have the social media actually calls in people and brings them to the street if they were to dissent or they were to protest, and this is happening everywhere in the world. So on one hand, you see the power of social media, how they are put to action. So that action on one side, it can be if the message is received for violence towards a particular community or turn ordinary mobs into murderers, it can do that when they can ask people to mobilize at a certain place to come for a cause, in the same way as it can turn them into murderous mobs.
You also talk about victims and victim shaming, and particularly in the digital economy, where many victims are punished for very wrong reasons by turning voyeurism into moral concern. Tell me, why does that happen?
So, we must separate evidence from spectacle or optics, as what mostly people call it. A violent video may be necessary for investigation, but that does not mean it should circulate endlessly amongst the public. In the book, I describe about a woman who was assaulted and publicly humiliated while people recorded her. It was a sexual assault and people were recording her, and ordinary people, even policemen. So many viewers forwarded the video claiming concern, including me, and yet forwarding did not produce meaningful intervention. It merely allowed her violated body to travel from screen to screen. The violence happened once, physically, but the recording produced it digitally every time it was watched or shared. A rights based system would preserve one secure evidentiary copy for the police and the courts while preventing mass recirculation. On one hand, it has such videos have evidentiary value. Platforms and news organizations should learn to blur faces and identifying details or remove location metadata, restrict downloads, use digital fingerprints to stop re-uploads and rapidly remove copies posted without consent. There must also be meaningful penalties for recording and distributing intimate or violent material. We have seen this in the Manipur assault videos. It revealed the dilemma clearly. Public visibility helped trigger accountability, but it also placed the survivor's trauma permanently inside the internet's memory. And similarly, repeatedly broadcasting a lot of incidents like that, which is incidents of violence, mob violence, and then it keeps circulating, and they have permanently stayed there on the internet, which is actually harmful for not just the victim as such, but also the larger community. The more number of viewers you have, it actually becomes a spectacle rather than just cater to the evidentiary value of such violence. Justice system may require preserving evidence, but it should not require the endless public circulation of a victim's pain.
We're seeing many different behaviors here, and I'm quite surprised, and you talk about it quite extensively. Gen Z is the most online generation, but you argue that it's the least susceptible to mindless forwarding compared to older generations. Why do you think it is the case?
So the finding in the book during my research, we found that Gen Z was the only generation which could not be misled by the virality of things on the internet. And it suggests that young digital natives were less inclined to forward messages mechanically. They often approach viral material with greater skepticism. Older users may place more confidence in their accumulated knowledge and in messages received from family, religious, or professional networks. And this is a very structured thing for older adults. And intimacy has a larger influence on their minds. So, forwarding also allows them to appear informed, helpful, and socially involved. And that's the reason the older adults were more affected or more drawn to forwarding the messages rather than creating it, whereas the Gen Z are more into creation of newer content rather than just forwarding. So in 2021, during the COVID, I was a part of a research team where we studied the WhatsApp behavior of COVID-19 infodemic, and that found that the older users, particularly boomers, forwarded more health related misinformation. Gen Z users were among the least likely to pass messages unquestioningly. They would question those messages most of the time. Yet they were not political. And then Gen Z generation is not politically passive. In climate marches across the world, such as in the US, the Black Lives Matter, Indian movements which concerned like protests like the CAA against CAA and NRC, farmers movement, young people researched, created content, and mobilized others. They moved from passive forwarding to active participation. I particularly believe that Gen Z may share less mechanically because it treats the internet less like a notice board and more like a space in which content must be questioned, remixed, or acted upon.
You talk about the infodemic. For all of us who are overwhelmed by the infodemic, what does reclaiming intentionally look like for us?
Reclaiming intentionality does not require abandoning the internet. The book describes the dilemma clearly. Leaving digital spaces may store peace, but it can also cut us off from useful information and human connection. The answer is to decide when to engage, what to believe, and what deserves our attention, rather than allowing notifications and algorithms to decide for us. I would not say that tomorrow morning, don't begin by automatically opening every WhatsApp message. Don't do that. I would not say that. I would rather say that read a trusted news source first. Mute groups that produce constant noise. As users, we should be in a position to understand what kind of content we are engaging with. Before forwarding anything, pause and ask, who created this? What is the original source? Is the date and the location, do they look correct? What emotion is pushing me to share it? It should not be an impulse just to share something and information which has reached you. The younger generation is acting much more maturely than the older generation. In this case, the book calls this as digital mindfulness, pausing before forwarding, reading before reacting, and contextualizing before concluding. The everyday good morning devotional and patriotic chains discussed in the book also show how repetition can exhaust attention and familiarity will feel like truth. But escaping that loop, therefore, begins with a small decision that not every message needs a reaction and not every reaction needs to be a forward.
Before we end this conversation, I'd love to learn, besides your own work, which all books would you recommend others?
I would very briefly tell you about 5 books because they were like a gospel to me during the time while I was researching and writing. So the first one is The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. She explains how our researches, emotions, and behavior are converted into commercial data. It is central to my discussion of the attention economy and algorithmic opacity. Then there is this Filter Bubble by Ellie Pariser, and that explains how personalization gradually surrounds us with information resembling what we already believe that we were talking about. And I have also discussed it in my book. Algorithms do not merely predict our choices, they progressively hide alternatives and narrow our perception of reality. There's another book, and very unusual but relevant in my case, is because I did refer to it quite a number of times. And this is the book called Identity by Francis Fukuyama, who examines contemporary identity politics and the human struggle for dignity and recognition. And it helps explain why misinformation built around religion, nationalism, humiliation, or community grievances becomes so emotionally persuasive. There are 2 more books I will name here, which I read after the manuscript of Forwarded as Received was completed, but they significantly enrich my thinking every day. And that is, one is Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams, the former senior executive at Meta. And she provides an insider's account on how decisions within a powerful technology company can affect elections, public discourse, and political institutions across the world. And there is another one is Rukmini S's Whole Numbers and Half Truths. And that has significantly influenced my understanding on how administrative and social data shape narratives, particularly in India. This is in the Indian context. And it reinforced my conviction that evidence based policy making requires not only accurate data, but also critical attention to methodology, context, and interpretation. And lastly, this is Nicole Turner Lee's Digitally Invisible: How the Internet is Creating the New Underclass.
Sadia Azim, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Gagan. Thank you so much for this opportunity.